Hello, everyone. My name is George Thomas. I'm the senior international correspondent for the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN News, based in Virginia Beach. As you are very familiar, mostly traveling outside of the United States. That's pretty much where I live. The last time you saw me, I was in Gaza reporting for almost a month. But I've come to our nation's capital for a very important summit. It's the International Religious Freedom Summit. This is their fourth summit. It brings together a bipartisan group of politicians, religious faith groups, NGOs all around from around the world, focused on the issue of religious freedom and how important it is to maintain those principles, those beliefs around the world. And somebody who has been for many years at the center of advocating, championing the cause of religious freedom across the religious spectrum is Ambassador Sam Brownback, who serves as a co-chair for the IRF Summit. Ambassador Brownback, it is always a pleasure to have you on. And our YouTube folks are very familiar with you. You're on our Faith Nation program with John Jessup and Jenna out of our DC bureau. And every time there's an issue of religious freedom, you are on our show, and we're always appreciative of your insights. And thank you so much for all the hard work that you do for this particular issue. This is the fourth International Religious Freedom Summit. What is the theme? Are there themes for this summit that perhaps is unique from previous summits? What's the goal here?
Well, our overarching theme is religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time. But the theme for this summit is exponential. We have to have exponential growth for this movement for us to be able to protect the people of faith that are being attacked all over the world. Yeah. And the governments are getting more oppressive, and they've got more technology to use. Yeah. And if we stand up and fight, we will win. Yeah. 80% of the world has a faith. They claim a faith and a faith orientation. So no dictator can stand up to us. But if we don't stand up, we're going to get oppressed, thrown into jail, killed, suffocated. We've just got to get this movement to stand up and fight. This is the most important human rights movement on the planet, is this movement for religious freedom.
If you are joining us, please go ahead and write your questions for Ambassador Brownback, whatever it is on your mind, whether it's a particular country, a particular theme, perhaps it's a trend that you've been reading about or seeing. Go ahead also and like and share the page. Throughout the next 2 days, we'll be bringing you great interviews like this with key leaders who are on the forefront. 80% of the population, which is absolutely staggering, Ambassador Brownback, 80% of the population today in the 21st century is facing some form of oppression. 325 million plus Christians around the world, in majority, countries that they are the minority faith, are suffering incredibly for their faith. What is it about religious freedom that seems to be uniting people of faith across the board?
It's a common human right, and it's a God-given human right. This is the human right of the soul. This is what God gave us. He made us in His image, and then gives us this yearning to find Him again. And if people aren't free to pursue that, it's like you've denied them essential human dignity. And I think that's what's really uniting it. We don't talk theology here at all, because there's all sorts of different theology. We do talk of a common human right, that right of the soul, this right that's the closest to who we are as a person, to pursue the divine, to pursue the eternal destiny of your own soul in the way you see fit.
In the United States, obviously, this is a right that is enshrined in the First Amendment. My question to you is, can the issue of religious freedom exist within a vacuum by itself?
No.
In the sense that, is it connected to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience? Because there are some who would say, let's just put this into a vacuum, let it stand on its own.
No, but I would turn it another way. I would say this is the cornerstone human right issue. You get this one placed right, you can build freedom of speech and assembly and a number of other freedoms around that. If you allow a person to do with their own soul what they see fit, you get this one wrong, or it's not there. It's much easier to suppress freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of press. You just don't have an entity. And the other thing is, we just heard from this Nicaraguan priest. If Governments fear religion often in a country more than anything else because it's often the last institution left in a nation that's not controlled by the government. It's the only place that people can kind of organize around to push back on the government.
I'm curious, is when you look at trends just in the last 10 years, last 15 years, do you see trends, Ambassador Brownback, that you are concerned about as it relates to the increasing persecution of people of faith?
I am
Yeah.
deeply concerned, particularly what China is doing. China is at war with faith right now. The Communist Party of China is at war with faith. It's a war they will not win. That one really concerns me because then they spread that through their system and their acolyte countries. And they're also, technology is the piece that really concerns me. You've got a cell phone. We're broadcasting here. These are all tracking devices that you personally carry, and that's your passport. You got to have that with you. You have it with you all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now you've got regimes that can say, okay, we know where George is right now. And we can get him. And we can also do keyword searches. And if he ever mentions the word Jesus, we can come after him. These are that use of technology and the willingness of oppressive regimes to use it diabolically is really deeply concerning.
And possibly the one country in the world that is deploying this kind of technology, be it artificial intelligence, be it facial recognition, would you say is China today?
It is.
Yeah.
You can get on a bus in China today. The camera reads who it is, hits your bank account. You don't pay anything. They just, okay, you're here. You can get a candy bar on a vending machine. Sees who you are, hits your account, pulls the lever, and you get your candy bar. That you don't even look, okay, that's great convenience. You can also look, they know where I am all the time.
Right.
And what if, if I don't do anything that is that they're concerned about, I'm fine. But what if I do want to go to church? What if I do want to follow Jesus as Lord and Savior and not the government? Now I got a problem.
And in many cases, is there evidence to show that China is exporting this kind of technology, be it AI or facial recognition, to other despotic countries around the world?
Yes, we know of 16, 17 countries using this technology. They're beta testing these control systems in a place called Xinjiang in Western China, Muslim Uyghur population, cameras everywhere, facial recognition, gait recognition system, tracking, keyword identification, and then they're trying to get to digitizing the currency, where you won't have physical currency, it'll all be electronic. Great convenience, but then if they want to turn your money off,
Right.
one switch,
Yeah.
you don't have any money, you don't have any access to
I'm
it.
curious, what is it about countries like Cuba, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, you can go down the list, Iran. What is it about faith that they are so scared about when in many cases populations use it to better themselves, to be better citizens, to pay their taxes, to be honest, to raise their children in a way that subscribes to their faith? What is it about these autocratic countries that they are so petrified of faith?
It's the one institution that can challenge them. It's the one organization that's there. It's the one group of people with enough passion in their heart and zeal and commitment that can stand up to an autocrat and say, I'm not going to take it anymore, and I'm even willing to risk my life that we don't have to take this anymore. I think that's pure and simple, because what you point out is true as well. Most people, by and large, around the world, they use their faith to better themselves, their own character. We're not perfect, but we're on a journey to be more perfect. And they use that to improve themselves. And so you would think as a government, let's support this. But now they look at it, you're the guy that can actually threaten me, and this is the institution that can organize against my power structure.
How would you assess our government's response to this issue? For quite some time, the United States has been on the leading edge of advocating for religious freedom, for human rights around the world. Yet, some people would say there's a disconnect between, okay, you guys are all talk, but you're no bark. In terms of levying sanctions, for example, on vis-a-vis, for example, a Russia or a China or a Cuba or a Iran that are known violators of human rights. Nigeria, a major trading partner for us on the continent of Africa, there doesn't seem to be, Ambassador Brownback, a real sense from our government, irrespective of political party, to really put some hard teeth behind them, be it sanctions, be it economic sanctions, be it military sanctions, in the name of religious freedom. Are you seeing that? Or can we do more?
Oh, we can do so much more. Take the situation in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, where you had 120,000 Christians literally run out in a period of a week by Azerbaijan. We're selling military hardware to Azerbaijan. Why didn't we stop that?
Correct.
Why didn't we sanction them? They drove an ancient Christian population out of their homeland. We clearly need to do more. We've got to get over that hump. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's like, it's important, but we're not willing to really bite and do something. We've got to get over that hump and take action.
So what is it? What is the hump? What is preventing our U.S. State Department, various branches of our government, to really push this issue? If at all it is an issue that we say we're important, that we consider as vital, why don't we do that?
And we haven't made it a sufficient priority. We've considered economic issues priorities. We've considered some other issues as priority, but not this one. It's really us saying this is a priority for us, and we're going to place sanctions on it to show that this is a priority and to make a government act. That's the only thing. Often they'll listen to the United States bark all day long. But if they actually have something that costs them, they go, whoa, okay, let's do something different here.
Is for you guys here holding this in our nation's capital, is this trying to send a signal that the United States does take this very seriously, and that religious freedom, not just here in the United States, but around the world, should be something that we continue to champion, and that the U.S. is at the forefront of it?
If the United States doesn't lead on this, nobody will. That's really what we're doing here at the nation's capital, is we have to lead on this because nobody else will. And we're getting people like Speaker Johnson here to speak at it. Mike Pence is coming. We want to get these key decision makers here to talk about this subject and to elevate it and to push it globally.
If you are just joining us, my name is George Thomas, Senior International Correspondent for CBN News. This is our good friend Ambassador Brownback, who is the co-chair of the International Religious Summit, Freedom Summit here in our nation's capital, bringing together a diverse group of individuals, politicians, faith groups to this conference to talk about the issue of religious freedom around the world. If you've got questions, please go ahead and write them. And if you'd like to share this particular link, you can absolutely do that as well. Today, Christianity, bar none of any other faith group, is experiencing a tremendous amount of persecution around the world. Talk about what it is that they are facing in places from Saudi Arabia to North Korea to Afghanistan.
And over Christmas Eve, you had over 200 people killed in Nigeria that were Christians. North Korea, if you're a Christian, you're probably in the gulag for life, and your family is in the gulag. In China, you're likely in jail if you're a pastor that's been open and opposing the government. If you're in Iran, you're arrested if you're known openly about this. If you're in the West, in many cases, you may be suffocated by being debanked or deplatformed for
something you have experience with.
I've experienced,
right.
And you're going, none of that's right. We're to be able to be free. And the thing about it is, George, if we don't stand up and call it out, it'll grow. There'll be more of it. And now is really the season for us to do this and to stand up, because we've got the numbers. There are more of us than there are of them. It's like we just haven't been organized or willing to fight enough. But we've got the numbers. We can do this. We just got to get organized and say, no, I have this right. I'm going to stand and fight for this right.
You have a chance to travel in your position around the world, and you meet people of different faith groups, whether it's Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. What do they say to you when you are in these countries where they experience a tremendous amount of oppression, persecution? What do they say to you in your one-on-one talks with them?
A lot of them don't think it'll ever change. The Christians, they're going, look, my hope is not here anyway. I'm looking to heaven. And others just kind of, well, if you can help me, okay. What I'm trying to stir up is to say, no, don't take it. Just start organizing in groups here. Start organizing and pushing back against this, because these governments they're supposed to be run for the people, and if they're not run for the people, then you have the right to push back on that. So I just think we've got to get over this idea that we're just pawns in the system and we don't have any power. We can, be not afraid. If we will move forward and stand up, we can reclaim this fundamental, God-given, constitutional right in the UN Charter of Human Declarations that's ours.
And when you look at today, as I mentioned, we've got Christians that are suffering immensely for their faith. You look at India today, the world's largest population, and they've got a government run by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has, in essence, peddled the sort of Hindutva, the sort of Hindu fanaticism. And as a result, it's not just Christians who are suffering today in India, but it's also Muslims. In fact, they are bearing the brunt of the persecution. Talk about other faith groups that are equally experiencing this, and how Christians, as a person of faith, as a Christian, how you can find commonality when it comes to these issues of religious freedom.
Well, that's what we do here at this summit. We'll have 40 different faith traditions or beliefs that are here. We'll have a number of Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, all sorts of different voices that'll be here, because all of them are experiencing this persecution. They're being persecuted for their faith. So we can find that common ground, and we have to find that common ground. For us to be able to be effective in this movement, you've got to have a big, broad playing field of people coming together, and that's happening. This movement has really been growing that way, and there's a lot more trust now, back and forth. People saying, "Well, I don't really agree with your faith." I know, but we're gonna fight together for this human right that's each of ours to have.
Yeah. Finally, a question for you, Ambassador Brownback. How can people around the world pray for those who are enduring tremendously for their faith, be it Christian, Muslim, or Hindu? How can we pray for them?
For them to have courage. I talk with a number of Christians that are persecuted around the world, and they don't ask to get out.
They don't ask for the persecution to stop.
They don't like it.
They don't like for sure.
They don't
for
want
sure,
it.
Sure.
But it's like, look, get me out of here. It's that I would just have the courage to represent Jesus well. And it's just this beautiful, humble, sacrificial faith that I hope they'll pray for them to have the courage to stand in this really difficult time. It is, unfortunately, the history of Christianity. It's the blood of the martyrs that is the seed of the church, and you're unfortunately seeing that in spades today.
Yeah. Ambassador Brownback, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. We've got a much beautiful co-chair of yours who is sitting by there, who we are going to have. So if it's okay, we want her to come on our broadcast.
She's a relative of Gaza War. I need to say anything
That's
else?
right, exactly. Ambassador Brownback, as always, a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on. So, folks, if you're just joining us, this is George Thomas with CBN News, senior international correspondent with the network. You predominantly see me traveling around the world, but as I've mentioned, I've come to our nation's capital for a very, very important a summit, one that focuses on the issue of religious freedom. If you are a viewer of CBN News, you know that you have watched my colleague Chuck Holton, Dale Hurd, Gary Lane, many others who have been profiling the plight of people around the world suffering for their faith. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, go ahead and write them in the box right below. I've got another distinguished guest who is about to join me. Katrina Lantos Sweat is a very integral part of the International Religious Freedom Summit here. She's the co-chair, and she's just getting mic'd up here. And right before she actually is joining, she's ready. We'll be ready to go. She has played a very integral part as well, being a champion on the issue of religious freedom and human rights. She has a father who is Tom Lantos, former Senator Tom Lantos, who was an iconic figure on this very issue of human rights around the world. And today, it's a pleasure to have you, Dr. Sweat, to come on CBN News. You are a familiar face on our broadcast, always willing and ready to do stories and to highlight the plight of people around the faith who are suffering for their faith. At this conference, the fourth one in its time, it's happening in the context of what we see today unfolding in the Middle East, specifically the war in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. How is that war today affecting the mood of the summit?
Well, the genocidal attacks of October 7th were a sort of shocking and terrifying wake-up call for the world, and a reminder of something that Ambassador Brownback has spoken about, and that is that most of the world's great catastrophic genocides find their roots in some sort of religious hatred and persecution. So in that sense, it's a very, very powerful and important sort of thematic reminder, if you will, of what the stakes are. But it is also a cautionary tale to us that when we fail to build societies where freedom of religion, conscience, and belief is really deeply embedded into the warp and woof of the societal fabric, we create circumstances in which everybody suffers. Now the people of Gaza, of course, are suffering terribly as well. And so it starts out with the targeted community. It could be Christians in Nigeria, Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region of China. We see, of course, a lot of problematic stuff happening in India. I heard you talking earlier with Ambassador Brownback about the concerns in India. But it never ends there, because it is antithetical to building a strong, stable, tolerant, prosperous, democratic society to defend these fundamental conscience rights. And so, I think you're right that the events of 10/7 and the follow-on challenges that it poses to how does that region move forward? How do they reestablish the ability to have enough confidence and trust that peace can be restored? It just, to me, underscores how vital it is that we attack the root cause, which is religious intolerance and hatred and an unwillingness to safeguard this right for everyone, everywhere, all the time.
And one of those, the outflows of the October 7th attack we are seeing, perhaps, and I want to get your thoughts on this, unlike ever before, has been seeing this toxic, unbelievable, shocking incidents of anti-Semitism. Have you seen anything like this before in your lifetime? I know your father was absolutely at the forefront of fighting this and putting a spotlight. And here we are all these years later after your father's passing. Talk about the climate that we see today and the explosion of anti-Semitism today.
It's so disturbing. It's really hard for me to adequately put into words how profoundly disturbing it is. My mother, also a Holocaust survivor, now 92 and a half years old, and she lives with me. And we both sort of say we never imagined. We had sort of thought, in retrospect, naively, that the extent of the tragedy and horror of the Holocaust might have kind of cured the world of that ancient poison. But we now see that that was not the case, and it is incredibly alarming and disturbing, and it's been eye-opening to me. Obviously, when you see what's happening on college campuses, the video of a mob in a remote part of Russia literally baying for Jewish blood and chasing Jewish travelers, through an airport, trying to execute a pogrom on them. These things are horrible, but they're also revealing much less disturbing, but nonetheless revealing little episodes that I have seen. So in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in the little town that I live in New Hampshire, on every third house, you had either a Ukrainian flag, or they had wrapped their mailbox in yellow and blue, or there was a sign in a window that said, "We stand with the people of Ukraine." And we did that as well at our house. We put a Ukrainian flag. We have a 3-part flagpole, so we have an American flag on top, and then you can put others on the side. And after the attacks of October 7th, I purchased and put up an Israeli flag below the American flag just to show our solidarity with the people of Israel at a time of terrible attack and suffering and danger, existential threat. Whole town, our house is the only one with such a flag. And that was eye-opening to me as well, that somehow, whereas there was tremendous eagerness to stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine in their time of need, I didn't see it for the Jewish homeland.
And what do you think is fueling that poison today? What is it? What is different? I mean, we've gone through various, manifestations of this war on terror against radical Islam around the world, be it in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Nigeria. What is this conflict that is happening today in Gaza that's different, that has turned the tide so dramatically?
It's such an important question, and it is not an easy question to answer. Let me offer a couple of possibilities. I think in the American context, we have seen the rise of a sort of political ideology of, on the one hand, DEI, and on the other hand, intersectionality. And in this political ideology, for reasons that are hard for me to understand as part of a heritage that has experienced pretty much nothing but persecution and isolation and otherizing through most of their history, but somehow in the minds, especially of young people, college people, the Jewish community, Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, has become identified as the oppressor. And so there is this desire to fight against an entity that they wrongfully view as an oppressor. So I think that's one piece of it. I think another piece of it is that there is just a latent but very deep-seated anti-Semitism that still courses through the bloodstream of many, many communities. And I don't know how one confronts it. The Jewish people, like all people, have their heroes and their villains, but writ large, they have been a force for great good in the world, in every conceivable field: medicine and art and literature and politics and scientific research and social movements, civil rights, and protecting the environment. You often find people from that community really in the forefront of extending women's rights. And so it's very troubling to me. But, somebody once said the best revenge in life is living well, is being good, is doing what's right. And so that is a sort of ideology and theme I try to keep uppermost in my mind.
Why is this summit important to you?
Well, this summit, first of all, it's fabulous. Oh my gosh, I wish all of your viewers could be here with us.
You are not biased one iota.
Not one little bit, but it is fabulous. And it represents the exact opposite of some of the tough things we're seeing in the world that you've been asking me about. At this summit, we come together, we put theology aside, we put ideology aside, and we come together, people from a huge range of faith communities, a tremendous number of countries, and a tremendous number of places on the political spectrum, to speak in behalf of and to advocate for the conscience rights of everyone, everywhere, all the time. It is so unifying, it is so inspiring, and really it is deeply encouraging, to see Muslims advocating for Jews and Jews advocating for Muslims, Christians for everybody, the Baha'i, the Coptic faiths, the Orthodox faiths, the evangelical community, the Hindus, the, really, literally every single faith community that you can imagine. And it's because we recognize that inherent to our ability to live out the whole range of human rights that we all want to secure for ourselves: freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of the press, freedom to petition your government, all those things that make civic life good and uplifting. They come back at the end to recognizing the inherent dignity of each human being. And that dignity is premised on our ability to live our lives in accordance with our deepest convictions. It goes back to religious freedom and freedom of conscience and belief. So Ambassador Brownback has said it before, and I entirely agree that this is in some ways the most vibrant component of the global human rights movement. And, religious freedom is a friend to every society that wants to do right by its people, every society. It results in greater harmony, in less extremism, less violence, less division. Religious freedom is the enemy to any dictator who wants to oppress his people, because it also gives individuals a sense of their own integrity. And when they have that, they're not willing to put up with the abuses of an abusive government. So any society, even if it's not perfectly liberal or democratic now, if it is moving in that direction, if its desire is to do good on behalf of its people, this movement is your friend and you should embrace it.
I'm curious, when you look at, for example, China, they see Christianity as probably one of the biggest national security threats to the existence of the CCP. When you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government and the BJP government, they look at Muslims and Christians to be a huge threat. What is it about these governments that see faith? As you just said, you just articulated the positive things that they bring to society, to their families. Those are all wholesome.
They sure are.
Right? So what is it amongst these governments that they're so concerned about a person who puts their trust, maybe not in them, but on something bigger? What is it?
Well said, well said. Well, I think in the case of China, of course, it is a dictatorial regime. And it absolutely, as you have suggested, views people of faith, a wide range of faiths, certainly Christians in China, the Falun Gong,
The
Tibetan
Uyghurs.
Buddhists, the Uyghurs. They view them all as a threat because these are people who place their ultimate allegiance to something other than the state and the Communist Party. So that is clearly the explanation there. I think in a place like India, which is a democracy, which should be a vibrant example for all the world, the problem is that Prime Minister Modi has moved away from the fundamental premise of modern pluralistic societies, which is everybody has an equal place at the table. And he has, in fact, stoked, in my view, the fires of Hindu nationalism and sought to make it first among equals. And that creates an environment legally through legislative means, but also socially through the pressures that these other communities face. It creates an environment where people are targeted, sometimes attacked for their faith, where the instruments of government, instead of being used to level the playing field and welcome everybody to the shared civic table, is creating a hierarchy of privilege and importance. And it's very, very destructive. It's very destructive for Indian society, and it's destructive for India's reputation. India, the world's largest democracy, has achieved many, many notable things, but this is emerging as an area of really grave concern.
And they've got major elections coming up. Narendra Modi is in the hot seat. Obviously, we have spoken, about the one group that tends to suffer the most around the world, Christians, 320 million plus. But in India, Muslims are also bearing the brunt of the BJP, the sort of Hindutva ideology. And in some cases, there's this attempt to rewrite history. To give it that flavor of a Hindu nationalistic flavor. Are you concerned about the trend of nationalism as it relates to people's experience and their rights to practice their faith?
I am. And I think whenever any faith community, Christian nationalism, Hindu nationalism, sort of what we see with the Russian Orthodox Church and their sort of blessing of this war of aggression in Ukraine, whenever we see the instrumentalities of the state trying to co-opt and kind of, link up to the power of a majority or dominant faith community, it is not good. It is not right. It is not healthy. And it's corrupting, in my view, for the faith community. It really is. I would say that I think one of the strokes of inspired genius of the American founders was that amazing First Amendment that did two very important things. First Amendment to our Constitution. It said on the one hand that there would be no establishment of religion, no state religion, no state preferences for one group versus another. But at the same time, it protected the robust free exercise of religion. This was revolutionary back then. At that time, almost every country had an established state church or state faith of some sort. And we carved a very different path, and we reaped the blessings of that bold and innovative and, as I say, in my view, inspired new formula. Separation of church and state, but robust protection for the free exercise for all people of faith. It's a really good model. It's the most successful model. And it is, the state has a corrupting influence on the church or on the religion when it interferes with it. And the faith community, when it starts getting itself into politics, can have a corrupting influence there too, turning matters of faith and conscience into matters of politics and nationalism. It's not a good combination.
Finally, Dr. Sweat, what would you say to people who are watching us around the world, be it in Syria, Afghanistan, in India, in Saudi Arabia, in some of the hardest places in the world where people of faith, be it Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Falun Gong, it doesn't matter, and they are experiencing tremendous amount of persecution. What would you say to them first? And then secondly, to our audience who perhaps have not experienced the kind of persecution and oppression that people around the world are facing, how would you encourage them to get even more involved in highlighting and putting a spotlight on this very, very important and fundamental issue to our existence?
By the way, you ask the best questions. What a fantastic interviewer. They're so thoughtful and so deep. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to someone who has such a wonderful understanding of this. To those who are suffering and experiencing this persecution because of their fidelity to their faith and their conscience, I would say to them, you are heroes. You are my hero. You're the hero of so many people. And your integrity is an example to us all and encourages us to put our shoulder to the wheel. But I would also say to them, don't give up. Don't lose the faith, and don't become weary in the well-doing that you are doing, because you are taking a stand for things of eternal value and significance. To the others, those who have freedom, who have opportunity, who have the privilege of living their lives in accordance with their own convictions, I would say step out of your comfort zone. Find a way to get engaged. If you sort of connect with the International Religious Freedom Summit, that's one way to get exposed to a lot of groups and organizations that are doing incredible work. Behind we have the logo of the CBN, but if you follow any of the events, you'll see the logos of dozens and dozens of organizations. See one that grabs your attention and say, I'm going to go to their website. I'm going to see what I can do. It may be as simple as writing them a check or sending them a donation, but there may be more meaningful, direct, personal ways you can get involved. We can and must carry this great human rights cause forward. It goes to the very essence of what it means to defend human rights. It goes to the very essence of building strong, welcoming, safe, and prosperous societies. And it goes to the essence of our integrity as people, to stand up for something so fundamental and profound.
And somebody who has been standing up for something so profound for many, many years is Dr. Sweat. Thank you so much for holding this summit. If you are interested in the great work that the IRF has been doing for many years, you can go to their website. You can go to also CBN News. As she said, there are a host of organizations across the political and the religious spectrum, which makes this event so much unique. Again, throughout the day today and tomorrow, we'll be interviewing just amazing people like Dr. Sweat and others who are at the forefront of championing this very, very important human rights. I hope you'll continue to join us. Dr. Sweat, thank you again so much.
It's been a great pleasure, truly a great pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, thanks. You are a fantastic interview.